Hello and welcome everyone. My name's Brenda Rogers and I'm the Training and Education Manager for Young Living Australia, and I have the very great privilege of a guest today, Maria Jones, and we're speaking about enhancing intuition naturally. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you, Brenda, and thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So let's start with you telling us a little bit about yourself and how you became to be interested in this topic.
Okay, so full-time I work as an intuitive medium, and I have been doing this work professionally for the last 18 years, and I started reading at the age of 12. So that's a little bit about how I started into it. And then, of course, coming across the oils, it took me 5 years to find them. Initially, someone came to me for a session, and my policy is when I see someone, I won't see them for a whole year. And she had flown in from Sydney, and she handed me an oil to ask her father, who'd passed over, what he thought of the oils, and he proceeded to give her a range of information. And what really had my complete attention was when I opened the oil to smell it, it was the frequency of the oil. It enhanced my energy field as well as hers. It spiked in a way that I've never seen before. So that had my full attention, and that's what led me to looking at how you can utilize the Young Living products to really enhance, your own intuition.
So a career as a intuitive medium is rather unusual career, Maria. Can you tell us a little bit about how that unfolded for you?
When I was 12 years old, my art teacher was quite quirky and eccentric and unlike any other creature that I've ever met to date. And she would often sit in her, she would often sit in the art room and not go up and sit with the other teachers at lunchtime for a range of different reasons. And I would go in there and pester her because I really enjoyed her company. And she taught me how to read palms. She never taught anyone else throughout her career and her life. And that led people sitting in front of me the ability to connect to people who passed over and their guides is something that I've always been able to do. I never had a near-death experience or a situation occur when all of a sudden I became completely aware of a phenomenon that was happening outside myself. It was just something that had always happened. What I found really interesting was when I first started to sit in front of people, which was 12, because what had led from that is my friends who discovered that someone had taught me just the basic fundamental lines of what the palms mean, would tell their parents and other people, and then people would come to me randomly and sit in front of me for me to read their palms, connecting to the other side, and their guides happen naturally. It's something that I believed and still believe that everyone has the ability to do. So when I was 12, I almost like it was a rude shock to discover that people wouldn't even listen to their intuition. And I still have moments, and I've been doing it for 18 years professionally, I still have moments where I still get a little bit startled that someone didn't listen to their own intuition when it was screaming at them.
So how important is intuition to your job, but to people's lives?
That's a really good question. I believe that we all utilize it, and many people call it different things. I've got a really good friend of mine who calls her intuition common sense. Some people refer to it as your gut feeling. Some people say it's your higher self or it's the unconscious mind. Some people will say that it was their connection to God. It's whatever it is for you is right for you. However you want to label it, and term it. So we all utilize it on a regular basis. It's just that some people choose not to pay attention to it. When you don't pay attention to it, you often wish that you had.
Mm-hmm.
So is it crucial to use it? The answer is yes. Do we use it on a regular basis? Yes. Do people ignore it regularly? Yes.
So what are some of the benefits that somebody might receive if they start to develop their intuition? Say they're using the oils or what are some of the ways that they can do that, and what benefits might they receive?
So the benefits of utilizing, your own intuition is that you'll find that life flows at a lot more of a greater pace, and you'll find that things move easier because you're paying attention to it. A really good example would be when you're in traffic. If you're driving and you're listening to your intuition driving, often you may or may not be able to avoid an accident. You may or may not be able to avoid a speeding fine. You may or may not be able to avoid, getting stuck in traffic. It doesn't necessarily mean that that won't happen either, but there's just a greater chance that will happen. I've heard many stories where people will have a dream and they have to stop at that stop sign because in their dream they saw this red car that comes swerving out of nowhere and it's speeding randomly fast, and then they find either the following day or 2 days later they're driving and they see that stop sign and they have deja vu, and then they stop. And they stop longer than they necessarily would have, and out of nowhere the red car comes past and it swerves past. Those stories are really interesting, and what makes it even more interesting is the person listened to it and avoided a car accident. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's an example of, maybe an extreme example of someone listening to their intuition. Parents will often listen to their intuition with their children. You often listen to your intuition, when you're traveling or when you meet someone, because, if you meet someone, maybe that they may not be in a good space, so they sort of don't feel quite right. And when you pay attention to it, then you can avoid maybe being hurt or being in a position where someone hasn't done wrong by you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the other part of my question was how we can enhance our intuition. But maybe before that, maybe it's worth even asking, because you said earlier that you think that everyone has this inherent ability, but then
Absolutely.
Yeah, then we either lose it or something happens. What is it that prevents us or reduces our access to this intuition? What gets in the way?
So kids often demonstrate their intuition at a really, I would say, that kids will often demonstrate having intuition at a much greater rate than most adults do, because they trust it. What happens is, Brenda, normally between the ages of 18 months and 7 and sometimes even 13 years of age, they're the brackets of age that I've witnessed where a child no longer trusts it anymore. They're looking at someone else, so they're stepping outside themselves, and they're looking for the answer outside themselves to another human being or to an authority figure, and then that creates this fragmentation and this it just fragments them trusting themselves, because that's fundamentally where your intuition's internal. It's not external. It's a relationship that you're having within your own self. So at the ages of 7, normally between the ages of 7 and 13 years of age, something occurs maybe multiple times to an individual or to that individual where they no longer trust it, at all. And a really, really good example would be this is a true story where 3 girls were walking home from school, and they were 7 years of age, and a perpetrator stopped the girls and said to these 3 girls, "I'm here to take you home because your mum said so." Now, 2 of the girls went with him and 1 of the girls ran home. And as a result of this young girl running home and alerting her mum, she was then able to let the authorities know, and they caught the perpetrator before any harm could be done to these girls, the other 2 girls. Now, when the police officers questioned this little girl that ran home, and they said to her, "What made you run home?" And they said, "Well, my mum, she always says to me, if it doesn't feel right, listen to it, really listen to it, and then question why doesn't it feel right. And then I ran home to ask her why it didn't feel right." Right? And then they questioned the other 2 girls. And they said, "What made you go with this individual?" And the other 2 girls proceeded to say, Well, he said it was because your mum said so. And then, and these are examples of when it can get beaten out of you as a child. Now, please be mindful that children do require discipline. That's something entirely different. But when you're in a position, when you're watching children, even at school or, through friends and, through their family, they often, it gets conditioned. It may or may not get conditioned out of them.
Yeah, fantastic example. And from my conversations with people, this flow that you're talking about, this ease and this, I even call it intelligence, that being connected to our intuition can give us, is what so many people are really looking for, even when they don't even realize that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, it's true. I would agree with that, Brenda.
So one of the things that I'm aware of regarding the oils is the vibration. How does intuition and vibration connect?
It's a fundamental part of why the oils and the Young Living products really make the difference. The difference when you're looking at how it can enhance your intuition naturally. So the oils, because of the way that Gary and his team work extremely hard to produce an oil that's still alive, as it's come directly from the plant, the frequency is actually the frequency is insane. It's vibrating in such a way that when you come close to it or get exposed to it, it opens up your own chakra or your energy body. It realigns, your chakras, and that can be the difference to really increasing your own level of awareness. Just that alone. And, because you feel a lot more balanced, as in spiritually, Brenda.
Yeah, I'm understanding that. So I'm just wondering if not being connected to your intuition is, well, what you're saying is that it's a different vibration than being connected to your intuition.
When I see people that aren't connected, or when I have felt moments when I've disconnected from it, there's a fragmentation that comes with that, because you're disconnecting to your own self in a way where you're not being resourceful. So you're completely disconnecting from yourself. You're being life starts to get hard, and you don't know why. You're like, why is everything so hard all the time? Because you're not listening, to your own intuition. You're searching for whatever it is outside yourself. So it just creates fragmentation. Whereas when you're connected and you're congruent, everything aligns itself, and the oils just enhance that in a way that is remarkable. That part of the oils I find really interesting, and it is part of why I love Young Living as much as I do.
Is there a difference between men and women regarding this? Is it easier or harder for each of us to connect to our intuition culturally and conditionally?
No, I don't see much of a difference. It's just that a man, depending on men, if they don't want to admit because they're macho or they're scared of it, that fear will create a barrier to connecting. But to be honest, Brenda, a lot of the well-known mediums are currently, you've got Jen Edwards, who I love. You may or may not like him, but I think he's fantastic. And then you've got, George Anderson, you've got the last program that was on TV, which was the one, Greg himself won that, a man. So a lot of men, when they really connect to it, seem to create a really big following in the industry. When you're looking at, people that are mediums and clairvoyants, men have the ability to connect equally as well as women. It's just whether or not they've got the guts to admit it.
Yeah, and fear has its own vibration as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Fear will decrease the body's frequency, up to 10 notches. When they've measured it through megahertz, the human body's frequency, when it's healthy, is between 62 to 68 megahertz. And when you're in a position where you're exposed to negativity, the frequency lowers about 10 points. Now, they know that when the body starts to become unhealthy, it starts at 58 megahertz. So if you go drinking a cup of coffee, if you love your coffee, please don't feel any sense of guilt over what I'm just about to share. But if you have a sip of coffee, it lowers your frequency by 10 points, and it remains that for 3 days. For some reason, tea doesn't do that, but coffee does. If I'm sitting in front of someone, who's come in for a session with me, and they're drinking coffee, their body is almost, the energy is very similar to someone who's doing cocaine energetically, because they're very fragmented, and their aura jumps at me, and I start to feel quite jittery. It's really interesting. But if you drink coffee all the time, you may not know that you're even doing that, because you're used to feeling that way. It's when you're not having it, you're like, wow, I feel so much more calmer. The human brain also resonates higher than the physical body. The human brain between 72 to 94 megahertz when they've measured it. So some of the mathematical geniuses have said that if you find anything above the human brain's frequency, it is absolutely off the Richter scale. Now, we know that when we've measured the Australian blue cypress oil, it's 522 megahertz. Now, that's crazy. So what that means is, if you've got 2 tuning forks, if you've never seen this, go and Google it on YouTube, right? And you just put 2 tuning forks and you activate one tuning fork, and it starts to vibrate on its own, and it makes this sound. And you've got another tuning fork, and you put that next to it, even at a distance away, without banging that tuning fork, it starts to vibrate and make the same sound as the tuning fork that's being banged. And that's how our body responds energetically to things, in very much the same manner.
Mm. Wow.
So the oils have this huge frequency, and when you're around anyone whose frequency is as high as that, then you start to resonate at the same frequency, and that just is mind-blowing when you look at the domino effect that can create, especially if you're diffusing, and the frequency that's coming from those oils, and the impact that's having on not only your own home but your neighbours' homes, and their neighbours' homes. It's amazing.
That might be a really nice place to start with our first oil.
Okay, so the first oil that you'll see is Believe. So if we go back, and I made the comment that I believe that we're all born with the innate ability to connect with our own intuition, but I believe it's part of what makes who we are. So this blend can really help facilitate that. One of the fundamental principles with really wanting to enhance your intuition is having trust and faith and believing in it. Especially when you're trying to connect to your intuition, it's very subtle. It's not obvious. If it was obvious, then we would all be able to connect with ease and find it quite an easy experience. Often it's very subtle, because your intuition lies behind all the internal dialogue that's happening within your own self, and also maybe whatever else is happening, whether it's your internal dialogue or the emotions. Intuition's way behind that. So often you're experiencing it extremely subtle. It's whether or not you're paying attention to it. But if you don't believe in it, doesn't matter how obvious or how subtle it is, you'll just ignore it. And most people fight with it. So this oil, often if you just take 1 drop, put it over your heart, take long deep breaths. It is my favorite oil of all Young Living oils, is Believe. It makes such a big difference when you start using it regularly. I've met people, Brenda, that have traveled the world and that have studied with, some of the most well-known people within our industry. So, they've gone to the UK, they've gone to America, they've spent a small fortune on really searching to enhance their own intuition and really learn to connect. But they don't believe that they can do it. Mm. And because they don't believe that they can do it, it is a waste of their own time and their resources to try to develop something that they don't believe that they can do.
So it reminds me that it's actually exam time at the moment, Maria, and I imagine that connecting to your intuition would be a very good tool to have if you're studying and if you're wanting to achieve something. And so if this was diffusing in the house, even though your 17-year-old may not be even aware of it, would it still be helping them in achieving
Absolutely.
their goals?
Yeah, absolutely. I will probably add a drop of cedarwood or vetiver with that. Absolutely, without a doubt. This would make a big difference.
Wonderful. So after we believe, what comes next?
I want also to make sure that you're aware that you might have a range of other oils that you have such an incredible experience with. You know, these are oils that I've chosen that I've found have worked exceptionally well, but there's a whole range of other oils that I'll use intuitively as well. It's whatever works for you. So the next oil that I would recommend would be Awaken. Now, you know, Awaken blend is a master blend. It really awakens all your spiritual senses, you know, and it gives birth to complete awareness. It is an incredible oil. It has all the other blends of joy essential oil, present time, forgiveness, dream catcher, harmony. I'll place a drop of this over the third eye and the crown chakra.
So for those not so familiar with chakras, can you just tell us a little bit about chakras?
So your body has its own energy system, and that would be the aura. And then you have your chakras. Now, they're energy points that are spinning along very specific points in the body that activate, you know, spiritual connection as well as many other factors. So that's probably how I would describe chakras. Every living being has chakras. Even the earth that we live in has their own chakras. It's interesting, Brenda, because in Australia, when I've taught the topic of intuition and spirit guides on the other side, and the range of topics that I facilitate, and when I ask people, do they know what the auras and chakra is, very little people aren't aware of them. You know, in Australia, we've got a very large percentage of people that are aware of them, but when I travel overseas and do, you know, and facilitate these workshops, half the room puts their hands up because they don't know what a chakra is. So they're just very vital energy points on the body that spin in a particular direction that you associate also to specific colours. They've been around and been documented in the Veda times as well, which is over 10,000 years old.
Yeah, and I think I recall the actual word means, is it a Sanskrit word that actually means wheel, because it's that spinning thing that you're talking about?
You've got it. That's exactly right.
So where are the third and crown chakras located?
Okay, so the third chakra, I would say, would be the throat. You know, so just where your Adam's apple is, that should be a third. Your second chakra would be, you know, where your third eye is. And your crown chakra is at the top of your head.
And that's where you tend to recommend putting a drop of the Awaken blend.
Yes. Awaken on either one of those chakras. You may intuitively feel like putting them on the base of your feet, and that works as well. It's whatever works for you. But the top three, this is what I'd recommend you at least experiment and see how you go with this by placing on one of those chakras.
Are you saying that placing a drop on the skin is better than diffusing, or just as good as?
Just as good as.
Okay. I
would also experiment with it. You know, some people have said to me, Maria, diffusing, it's fantastic. I don't feel the urge to do that. Other people have said, it's made the difference when I put a drop of it, you know, over, you know, on my crown chakra. It may not even be a drop. It could be like the smallest amount. Some people say they hold the bottle over that area and it makes a difference. It's whatever works for you.
And what other oils would you recommend?
So the next oil that I'd recommend is Release. You know, so often when you're, you know, connecting and trusting the intuition, if there's anything that might be getting in the way of really enhancing it, or, you know, or making it a lot more fine-tuned, this is where I would use this oil. And probably the best place I would recommend you put it on is either on the throat chakra or over the solar plexus. You know, that's the area that I would, you know, recommend you use it. Because often when you're trying to go deeper in your connection and something gets in the way, it can distort the information, or it can even create a situation where you may find yourself not quite connecting and believing your intuition to be something that it isn't. So you start hallucinating something that's not there.
Do you have an example that you can give us of somebody who's blocked and then, and not, there's something in the way of their intuition, and I guess, using release, you might expect something different.
Yeah, if someone, as an example would be, there was another person who's in the industry that I'm quite good friends with, and, we're catching up, and he was going through, at that point, a separation. And he was chatting to me of how that was impacting his work. And he was saying, Marie, I'm taking time out. I just can't. I'm finding it really hard to even connect to my own intuition, let alone sitting down with someone and connecting and helping, me connect for them. And I suggested they use this oil and place it intuitively over these areas that I'm discussing, and he found that was an instant. It helped him release the very thing that he was stuck in. I don't know if that helps, but that was the example that came to mind when you said that.
That's excellent.
Asked that. So he really worked well with that oil, and it's an oil that I found works really well if there are a few detectives that are using the oils, and they often rely on their gut feeling. They will often rely on that unspoken hunch. And often if they're in a position where they're dealing with some pretty heavy cases, that case can get in the way of them listening to their hunch. So this is where I recommend those individuals use release, again, over those exact points. And they've come back and said it's made a big difference. It's interesting when they're like 6'4", very macho, going into the toilet, putting release.
I imagine, or I hope, that it also helps with that fear that you were talking about earlier, or anger, which can also really block us, can't it?
If you're in a situation, you find yourself in a state of frustration, a state of anger, that may very well, and it may not for some, but often it just completely disconnects you instantly. It's just like having a blackout at home. You're completely disconnected from electricity. Because the surge of that emotion is so strong, that's all you can focus on. And often what you're focusing on in that moment is where your attention is completely. So you can't focus on anything else. This is where the release is such a really important oil to use to help release that very thing that may be blocking you.
And I imagine also then that for people who are therapists or practitioners of some kind, that this might be one of the key oils for assisting them with clients?
Yes. I'll often diffuse this if I'm seeing a lot of angry people, to help them energetically release that. So the next oil that I would recommend would be sacred frankincense. If we just go back a moment, I've recommended believe, then awaken, to really alert all your spiritual senses and bring them back to life. Release, to release anything that might be getting in the way of that. And then frankincense, to enhance it. Frankincense, both of them are exceptional oils. Sacred frankincense has a high frequency, and sacred frankincense has only been available to us only recently, because the royalty in Oman used it. And we're the only company in the world that has this oil. So that within itself is pretty awesome. This will will power up your intuition. It will make it bigger and bring a lot more to your attention when you're using it. It's an incredible oil spiritually to use. Frankincense alone has been used in all the spiritual practices now for centuries. So I would recommend placing this on the third eye, over your heart, on your crown. I would bathe in this oil if I could. It is a fantastic oil when you're looking at increasing your vibration and looking at connecting further on, to your guides or to the divine or whatever you might want to call that energy. And that connection, when you're reconnecting to the divine or to God or to the high source, when you're aware of that connection with how that may work and play a part with your intuition, is it powers it up. It just makes it so much more stronger.
I imagine it could be great for when you're doing yoga or when you're meditating or...
Absolutely. Yeah. Often frankincense and sacred frankincense is the oil that is used most commonly in meditation. And any sort of spiritual ceremonies as well. It is a very sacred oil. And
would you use it as well as awaken and believe, or is it instead of, or how does that work?
It's up to the individual, Brenda. I've used all of these within 5 minutes apart from each other, because they always have their own little intelligence because they're alive. So they'll go where they need to within the body. I've also spaced that out over a day. I've spaced them out over a week. It's whatever is right for the individual. There's no right or wrong when you're using them. You know, it's up to the individual. I've used. I'm a heavy user of the oils because I love them. I love the smell of them. I love the impact that it's having. So it's up to the individual. You might just want to play with one oil a day. You might want to use them all at once if you have them. You might want to slowly start to look at getting them and using them. It's up to you and what your purpose is using them and how you choose to use them.
Well, let's move into our next oil then.
Okay. Present time. So most of the intuition that you're receiving is happening now. It's not happening yesterday, and it's not going to happen. It's happening right now. And if you're not present, you will miss what's happening right now. So this is why this is, I would say this is one of the most important oils to use in all the oils that I've discussed. It's one of them. It's not. It's on the list of probably the top 3. I would place a drop either on the back of the neck, on the third eye, or wherever you're drawn to. Take 3 long deep breaths from the bottle would make it will make a huge difference. So when you're present, it acts like a magnifying glass on your intuition and your awareness. When you're not present, you're missing a lot of what's happening. So when people are wanting to access their intuition, they're wanting to access to it now, but if they're not in the moment, they miss it. There's a really good example of this that I can give you, where there was a lady that I've been seeing now for the last 4 years. She's beautiful. She's 88. She was married to a husband only. She got married at 70. She was single, all that time, and very happily to be single. And then she met the love of her life, right? And then he passed. And when she first came to see me, she was just this dear old thing, perfectly groomed, tiny. She was 5 foot nothing, perfect hair. And she said to me, Maria, she said, I was really, really happy. And then I met him and my whole life changed. It was the best 10 years of my life, before he passed. And she said, oh, only if I get to see him just for a quick moment, I'm going to know, that he was there. And he told me in the session to let her know that he visits her all the time. She just misses it because she's not present. She's looking for something that isn't there. If I complete the story for you, a year later she's come to see me, and she's sitting there, and he told me to let her know that he'd made an appearance, just as she asked, and she happened to be present enough to pay attention to it, and that still wasn't enough for her. Because just in that situation, with her, it wouldn't matter how often she was aware that he was there. It doesn't bring him back from where he is because he's crossed over. But when she's present, she's able to pay attention to him. And when she's not present, she misses out on all the little things that he does to let her know that he's around.
So how do we know that we're not present?
Well, a lot of time we go into a state of, a lot of people trance out naturally, and there's nothing wrong with trancing out at all. It can be quite a resourceful state to be in. So you daydream, you're in a daydream and you come out. If you observe people, they do it quite regularly on a regular basis. When you're meditating, you go into a little bit of a trance state where you lose all track of time and you lose all track of space around you. People do it when they're eating, so they'll finish the meal and they don't remember eating it. And they're like, oh, I still want to satisfy these senses. So then they go look for something else, and if they're not present with that, they're still not satisfied. It's interesting. When you're in the middle of a conversation with someone, and your spouse is often used to doing, you're talking to them, and you know that they're not listening, and then you start rambling on something entirely different, and they don't even respond, and you're like, you're not listening to me, and they're like, yes, I am, and you're like, no, you're not. Yes, I am. What did I just say? That's how you often know when you're not in a position of being completely present.
So we talk a lot about mindfulness now. Is that the same thing?
It can be, depending on what your definition of mindfulness is.
And what's the next oil?
So the next oil would be clarity. So when you're connecting to your intuition to become super clear, and also to allow your intuition to become clear, clarity. It's great when you're meditating. Let's just say your practice to connecting to your intuition may be through meditation. Some people do it through exercise. Some people do it through running. So let's just say that you're wanting to become super clear with what it is that you're wanting your intuition to perhaps maybe respond to at that moment. So you're going for a job interview, and you want to be really clear whether or not you're going to get the job interview intuitively or not. This is where this oil plays a really crucial part with your intuition.
Wow, that'd be great for presenting or delivering information where you really need to be concise and clear with what you're saying.
And clarity is such a stimulating oil. If you breathe it in, it's quite stimulating, which it creates even more clarity. When you're exposed to the oil, but being clear when you're connecting to your intuition is super cool. Because the last thing you want to do is, you want to be being very unclear when you're connecting to it. If you're not clear when you're connecting to it, you're not going to know what you're looking for. It's like trying to look for a needle in a haystack. I want to connect, but I don't know what I'm being clear about.
Yeah, it sounds crazy.
It's like when you're hungry and you don't know what you want to eat. Yeah, I'm hungry, but I don't know what I want. And you're at the restaurant and there's like 100 different choices to have, and you're looking at everyone else's meal, trying to figure out what it is that you're looking for, because you don't know what you're looking for, because you're not clear.
And do we have more oils?
The next oil that I would recommend is inspiration. Inspiration oil used to be called prayer and meditation, and then it was changed to inspiration. It has a really, really interesting frequency where it really strengthens and enhances the connection to God or your higher self or the divine. I don't even know if I can really describe what this oil does. I'm in love with it when I'm using it. Would go probably on my top 5 oils when I'm wanting to really enhance and strengthen my own personal intuition. Again, I would put a drop over the third eye, the heart, the crown chakra, or wherever you feel drawn to wearing it. You could just even diffuse it. There's something sacred about this oil.
And when do people tend to use it?
Through meditation, through prayer, when they're looking for that, extra sense of inspiration that they may feel that they need. They may need that extra inspiration when they're studying. They may need that extra inspiration when they're tackling a project, or an artist who's looking for an extra inspiration for the next drawing. That's where you would use it to enhance your intuition with the project or your intent for using it. Because the intention for using the oils is crucial. So before I use any of the oils, I would sit with the oil, I would hold it, and I'd place that intent in the oil before I put a drop of it on my hand, just to magnify it even more.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the third eye represents? When we're opening up the third eye, what might that bring to our lives?
Well, the third eye is connected very strongly to the sense of clairvoyance. When you're in a position where you want to see clearly, and when you're using that scent with your clairvoyance, often when people utilize it, they can utilize it in a way that they don't even know it's happening, because it can happen really fast. It can happen really slow. It can also, believe it or not, be quite cryptic, depending on what the person is meant to receive at that moment. So, the third eye is connected to the clairvoyance, where you want to see clearly. Some people see an image like a daydream, and it can play out really long, other times really short. For example, you might be sitting with your friend and you see an image of a baby, and you're like, are they pregnant? They may or may not be pregnant. They may have, this is if someone doesn't have a child, or they're looking at having another baby, or they may have, just come from the hospital visiting a friend that's just given birth to a baby. But you haven't been given that information. You're like, this is interesting, I'm seeing a baby. And you might, without realizing it, saying, why am I seeing a baby? Just naturally in conversation with your friend. That's how I would describe the third eye.
So it sounds like it's not so much sight as in seeing something physical, but the sight, a different kind of sight.
When you're utilizing all your spiritual senses, Brenda, you're utilizing them internally. You're not utilizing them externally. It's happening within you. So let's just say you've got someone who's passed over that was a heavy smoker. You'll be able to smell them, but no one else in the room can smell them, and you're like, that's interesting. Or you walk into a room, you're like, what's that smell? I can smell smoke, and everyone's looking at you like you're a little bit crazy. So like, I can't smell no smoke. That's utilizing your spiritual sense of smell. It's happening internally, not externally. And it's the same when you're seeing, it's happening internally, not externally. It's not like the show Medium, with Alison Dubois, who, believe it or not, never dreams. But how they've sensationalized it in Hollywood is that it's happening, we're seeing it from an external point of view, but that person's experiencing it internal, and what she's seeing, you wouldn't even be able to make sense of it, because it's her sacred conversation that she's having with her own intuition and people that have passed over and her guides.
Thank you for that clarification. Now, do we have any more oils?
Yes, we have 2 more oils that I've put in here. So harmony, the importance of balancing all your energy centers and your chakras as well as meridian lines. See, all of these oils do this, but harmony really harmonizes them. It's really interesting what this oil does. I've played with this oil and I've taken it out in a session and just put it on the table in front of someone when their chakras are really disjointed, and watch them come completely in alignment and watch them breathe differently to coincide with what's happening. So they might be not breathing properly and really uptight. Take the oil out, put it on the table in front of them, Brenda, and they start to breathe really, really deeply and slowly, and I watch them come completely in congruency with their own selves as a result of their chakras and meridian line balancing out. It's really interesting what happens. It's a good oil to place over the sacral chakra. So, or even on the belly button, on the base of the feet. Again, when you're using these oils, allow yourself to feel where to place them and see and feel and be mindful of the way it's impacting you when you're using them. Pay attention to the way that your body's feeling when you're using them. Pay attention to, all your senses when you're using them. But this oil is remarkable when you're wanting to really balance out your chakras and the meridian lines. When they're out of balance, your intuition becomes disjointed. It's like listening to a radio station that's not in tuned.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for our last oil?
The last oil is white angelica. And the importance of it is when you're using your intuition, what tends to happen is your energy field becomes really big and vast. And what can happen for some people, it may or may not happen to you, but it can happen to some people, is that their aura can become quite fragmented, and they may very well just start absorbing someone else's pain, or they may absorb, someone else's emotion. Like, you might walk into a room and you're sitting in front of someone who's having a really off day, and then you start feeling it. And, if you're not being mindful and being present, you won't even realize that that's got nothing to do with you. Then you're trying to analyze, because we're creatures that love to analyze everything, and put it, you start to analyze and start to feel what is going on within you where it's got nothing to do with you, and that can create disjointedness in your energy field. and pockets of holes, as some people might want to refer to them as. So White Angelica restores the energy field. It really puts the energy field, back together, and creates really a lot more wholeness. Great for practitioners, great for people that are around other people that are feeling off and so caught up in whatever they're going through that may or may not be making them really self-absorbed, and not being mindful of the impact it might be having on another individual. So this is a great to travel with it on planes, because you're sitting with other people and your energy field's emerging and dancing and colliding and doing all sorts of really interesting things, and then you're absorbing what they're feeling. So it's a great oil to put a drop of this on your shoulders.
I imagine also it might be great if you're taking care of like an elderly parent or a sick child or that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
In hospitals.
I couldn't agree with you more. So then you're not absorbing what they're going through, because whether we like it or not, it's part of what happens to our energy bodies naturally, is we start to absorb what someone else is feeling. So this is where I would strongly suggest someone, really utilize this oil. It's a fantastic oil to dispel that. So it's also a good oil even to put a few drops of it in a spray bottle. And when you might have someone that's come around that might be not in a very good space, if you don't have the diffuser going with this oil on, you can just spray the room after they've left, and that can really make a big difference even to the home and the environment you're in. It's a good oil to use when you're feeling off energetically and you're not really knowing what's going on, because you don't know what you've absorbed and what you've taken on board.
So if you have somebody over that you don't particularly like, or I was going to say the mother-in-law or something like that, but that might not be it might not be a good thing to say.
I would maybe use forgiveness and acceptance for that. For the energy, energetically, just for you to energetically invite those the energy of it in the space. But White Angelica for sure, especially if the person's really difficult.
And are there any other Young Living products that you would recommend other than the oils?
Ningxia Red, Energize, Sulfazyme. Listen, there's something really sacred about that combination for me anyway. And when I've seen other people use them, for the ability to really regenerate and boost the chi, the prana, the life force within our bodies. See, the oils are infused in these products. So the frequency of them is also really high, and a lot of people report, that their body, the energy of the body starts to balance and become a lot more smooth, and it amplifies, the energy field in a really remarkable way. So I know for me that when I used Ningxia Red and Energize, my whole body changed. I had a complete change of what was going on. Some of the spiritual aspects of it is I found that I was a lot more alert and was able to really tune in on even more subtleness that I didn't realize I had the capabilities of tuning into. So as well as my body feeling so much more happier when I was using it. When you're connecting to your intuition, Brenda, it tends to really, you're using a lot more energy, so your body's, the battery is running at full capacity. So if you want to power up that battery, energetically, these are remarkable products to do it with. If I didn't use them the way that I did, there's no way in the world I would have been aware that they had the capacities of doing what they do. So I was so happy when I purchased these products and started using them, and really saw the significant difference that it had.
Wow.
And still has. If you're into wanting to feel good and feel more alive energetically, you will absolutely love those products when you combine them.
I can imagine that having your cells well nourished and, correcting nutritional deficiencies, even though it's a physical thing, that's going to support and enhance intuition as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you're the expert in that field. Absolutely. I would wholeheartedly recommend you just play with it. And, you know, keep in mind that if you play with it, at least give your body a month. You know, give it a month. So when you start using it, just just observe it over the month. You know, and it's the same with any of the products that I'm discussing. But the nutritional range of what Young Living has to offer is beyond anything that I've currently seen. And that may very well be because of the oils being in there. It may very well be of the synergy of how Gary's put them together. But there's something remarkably different because the CoQ10 alone in the omega dyes, you know, is one of the best in the world. You know, so could you imagine the chi that comes from that?
So,
can you imagine feeling that in the body?
Yeah, that would be. I'm going to take some straight away. But I just want to ask you, I've got a personal question about this because I know with some people who are already perhaps what we call intuitive, we often call them sensitive, and yet the dose for omega dyes, or not so much omega dyes, Ningxia, is, you know, it's usually 30 to 60 mils. Do you find that some people have an additional sensitivity and that they need to maybe take less or modify the dose in some way?
It depends, because we're all made up so differently. You know, everyone's body is completely differently. So I would listen to to the body. I know that the detoxification reaction to it, when you first start taking it, can present itself. So, you know, with anything, when you're detoxing, when you're taking anything, you know, it may or may not present in a really pleasant way, depending on the person and what they're experiencing. You know, if you're sensitive, then, you know, start off slowly and then, you know, gradually maybe increase it slightly more to see the difference. Mark Schrader, the gentleman, the scientist who helped develop this with Gary, recommended, the new modified version he did, recommended 4 to 5 omega dyes twice a day. And I've played with the dosage, and my body is different to your body, Brenda, but I take 60 mils a day. I take 30 in the morning and 30 in the early afternoon. I don't take Ningxia too late in the evening because I find that my body's energy is so much more alert after I've had it, you know, and then I find that I can't fall asleep as easily as I do when I don't have it so late. You know, so it's interesting with how everybody's body may or may not react differently to it. I would play with it. So to answer your question, it depends on the individual. So if you're sensitive and you feel that you only want to have a small amount, then by all means have a small amount. But when you're taking Ningxia, if you can have it twice a day, so use a small amount twice a day, because then you absorb the nutrients, you know, much more effectively. So you're getting more out of the product. There was a lady that started using Ningxia, and she said to me, we had a workshop at her house, and she's in her 60s and she just retired. And she said, Maria, she said, I don't know, but since I've been using Ningxia, I don't need to clean my toilet very much anymore. She said it's made my toilet cleaner, because she said it's helped her, eliminate things so much more better. You know? So that, I mean, I found that really interesting.
Well, thank you. I think we've come to the end of our time, and by way of wrapping up, Maria, I'd just like to ask you final comments or your final piece of advice for people listening in. What would you recommend overall?
Well, I would recommend that you use the oils that you're most drawn to using. You may or may not want to try the oils that I've suggested. I would use them and really pay attention to what's happening on the day of using them, and also, you know, practice being mindful, practice the intent behind why you're using them, especially with the oils that will amplify it, and really listen to what's going on internally and trusting, your intuition. That would be my advice. It's just trusting it, because you know your own self better than anyone else does. And what works for you, it is important that you pay attention to that and not get distracted by perhaps what someone else might believe works for you, because that's when it creates fragmentation. That would be my advice. And I would love to hear some feedback. If you want to chuck me a message to see if you're using them, whether or not you found that all of a sudden your intuition became a lot more alive and amplified, and you were aware of those, finer senses. So thank you so much for having me, Brenda. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. I hope everything that I've said, has helped, and I look forward to hearing the results people get from using these.
Thank you so much, Maria. I think that this is something many people are looking for. It's really about working smarter and not harder. It's living life with ease and grace. It's being more intelligent in our decisions, and that, the power of clarity and the power of harmony. And you've expressed that and explained that exceptionally well. So I'd like to thank you very much, and hopefully we will get to speak to you in perhaps a future webinar.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Thank you very much.